Okay, so in this video we are going to be finishing our baby hat. I have written out our actual pattern here, so just to refresh, you will cast on 53 stitches, and then you're going to join in the round and place your stitch marker. And then from rounds 1 through 38, you'll be knitting 2, purling 2. You should always end on a purl 2 before your knit stitch. If you do not, and you need to add a stitch or decrease a stitch, we can kind of go over that in another video, but basically there is a way to correct that at that point. Once you've gotten your 38 stitches, or your knitting ends up being about 6 inches long, which mine is just over 6 inches long, you can count your stitches. One of the easiest ways, you can count either the V's or the loops. I like to count the loops because it's a little bit easier. So I would just start here and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as you see that little loop, you're just bringing that up and counting that little loop. So that's how you can tell if you're at 38. All right, we are going to go ahead and start with the round 39, which is knit 2 together, purl 2. And then repeat until the end of that round. So what that looks like, if you're knitting left-handed, continental, you're going to go ahead and hold the yarn in your left hand, get everything pushed up here, and you're going to knit 2 together. So what that means is you're going to go under both of those stitches and knit them. So that is decreasing. And we're going to then bring our yarn back to the front and do our 2 purl stitches separately, and then go back to the knit, purl 2 together. So we're just going through both loops, through both loops, and then pulling through, okay? And then we'd go back to the purl. If you are knitting English style, you would hold the yarn in your right hand. Sorry, I didn't mean to knock that. All right, so we're going to go back to the knit. So we're going to knit 2 together. So we're going to go through both stitches, bring our yarn over, and go. Throw it off a cliff, I guess, right? All right, so then we're going to go ahead and do our 2 purl stitches. So yarn over, and 2 knit stitches together. So you're going to continue this all the way around. It is a little bit like when you're trying to pick up those 2 stitches, sometimes it's a little hard to get both of them, but just take your time until you get used to picking up both of those stitches. I do want to apologize for my nails. I had an offsite yesterday where we played in alcohol ink and it caused my hands to look atrocious. So excuse the weird nail polish. I guess I could call it art polish, huh? Okay, so once we get to the end of this row, we will now have joined all of the knit stitches and kept our purl stitches separate. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to being continental so you guys can see how that looks, in case you need a refresher on how that's done. So we're going to knit those 2 together. And there's that little, you see that little extra string that kind of came on there. I'm going to drop that when I come around the next time. All right, we're going to purl. And then knit 2 together. Should be getting close. Yes, we're getting close. All right, so knit 2 together. last two as pearls. So guess what? We counted right and we're on track. We didn't accidentally do the wrong stitch somewhere. Okay, so now we're going to go to our round 40, which is knit 1, because now since we combined 2 of the knit stitches, we've combined it into just 1, or we decreased it to 1 stitch. So we will knit 1 and then we're going to purl 2 together. So all that looks like is knit 1, put your needle through both purl stitches and purl those 2 together. And then knit 1, purl 2 stitches together. Knit 1, purl 2 stitches together. And it's okay if you have to repeat that to your brain while you're doing this, because you're only doing this row once. So whenever you're changing your sequence, it's okay to say it aloud even if you have to. Purl 2 together. Whatever helps you stay on track. You can also look to see that and you'll notice this as you're knitting, that you'll have 2 bumps whenever you have a purl stitch that you purled last. You'll have 2 bumps, so you know that those are your purl stitches. And then your knit stitch, it looks like kind of a loop going behind, or the V. Purl 2. All right, I should probably switch to English so everybody, or not, yeah, English, so everybody can see the right hand. So let me switch back. We'll go back to right. All right, so we got our knit and 2 purls together. One knit, 2 purls together. One knit, 2 purls. All right, and if your string gets like cut like that, just fix it right then when you're at it. So just by correcting that. All right, and then this is our last 2 purls. So guess what? We're on track again. Yay! I always have a little celebration when we get to the marker and we haven't messed up. Okay, so now that we've completed a row 40, we are going to go to 41 and we're going to knit 1. So every single one is just knit stitch. These little asterisks means just repeat to the end of. Up here when I explained it, it's like it's round 1 through 38 and you just repeat that same pattern. So your string is just going to stay in the back this whole time. So this is an easier row. You are going to notice that your stitches, because we've now just decreased them basically in half, it'll be a little bit tighter as you're working. So you'll notice on my needles here, the cable is just, a little bit more squished, but this is why we work with such a smaller cable set of knitting needles. So that way those stitches don't get too stretched. And you might have to see how it looks a little different. It's so spread out because we have so many fewer stitches. So we're going to continue this process. There's going to be a little extra tension there at the end. So we're going to knit all these bad boys together. All right, so see how I kind of split the yarn there? I'm going to undo that stitch because I accidentally split it and it didn't look good. So just undo it and go back and redo that stitch again if you do that same thing, if you ever find yourself doing that. I notice with like really, really sharp needles, I'll do it more often, or with yarn that's like super fine and like baby soft, which we are working with making baby hats, so we might have some of that yarn in our hand right now. And it's easy to kind of split your yarn, but take the time to correct it so then that way it doesn't weaken the stitch. So there's that little bit of fuzz that I picked up there. I'm just letting it slide off with that stitch. I'm not worried about one tiny little fuzz looking thread, but if I take a whole thread, I'm definitely going to be correcting it at that time so I don't have a weak stitch. Okay, now that we've completed that, we're going to complete the last round, which is our round 42, and it's knit 2 together. So we're basically just decreasing this all again in half. So we're just going to knit all of these together. This is where it gets a little bit harder because, again, we're going to have less stitches on, but it's okay. This will be the last time that we have to do it. So we're just going to keep going. Every 2 that we see, we're knitting them together. And this is where you're really going to have to push them up. Push the ones off of the right needle down your cable so you can give yourself some slack and bring those other stitches up. And take your time with this. Don't rush it. And then see how I've kind of I grabbed too much of the thread. There we go, split. So I just correct it. So that way there's not a weird stitch in there. This is getting so difficult. So one thing you can do, I'm going to put some stitches back up here just so my needle will work. This is where it gets the hardest. That's why I like that other set of needles better. But what you can do is you can take your cable and kind of pull it out, and now you've got the slack that you need to kind of continue that decrease that we're doing. If I can get my needle in there. It doesn't want to needle. There it goes. You're getting so close. And just working those stitches up to the left to give us access to these stitches. There we go. Come on now. This one's being a pain. So what you can do is kind of create a hole there more, so then that way you can get it in there. So all I did was I pulled on the stitch. So this stitch is the one that's been giving me trouble. So it's because there's no tension on it. That second stitch, there's no tension on it. All the tension's on this first one. So if you bring tension to that second stitch, you can get your needle in there better. So it's just pulling on that back stitch to give it some space. Just a little tip. All right, we are finally at the end. We can remove our stitch counter. We're going to look for, I should have had this ready. We're going to look for a yarn needle. So yarn needles come in either metal. They can also come in a plastic, which, oh, here's a good plastic one. This is a better one. So it doesn't matter which one you go with. I'm going to go ahead and do this plastic one because it's bigger and easier to see. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to just take this yarn. Oops. Okay, so this yarn that we are working yarn, we're going to go ahead and just take about, I don't know, a foot and trim it. And now we're going to thread our needle. And the very next stitch that we would have stitched, we are going to go ahead and push off. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take all of my stitches so they're ready to go off of the right or off the left needle. All right, so Just like if I was knitting, I'm just actually just transferring all of these stitches to the yarn needle. There we go. Getting that cable finally straightened out gives you some slack that you need. You're just going to continue to just transfer them off. We're not stitching them. We're not doing anything special to them. We're literally, and you can take 2 at a time if you wanted. All right. Now, you've got this loop out here. So this is where we have our loop where we started. I'm going to hold on to that loop. I don't want to pull it straight through because what I'm going to do is take my needle through that loop and bring it closed. Okay, so at the top you'll see that there's a little hole there. I'm going to stick my needle through that hole. I'm going to turn my work inside out. And if you drop your needle, not a big deal, you just re-thread it. Okay, pull it tight. So you can see this is the center of where we just pulled it tight. So now it's all completely closed. I'm going to start going through a couple of so each 2 of these is basically one of the stitches. So each 2 loops is like a stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that through, make sure my tail's through there too. And what I've done is I've created just kind of a little knot when I did that. So I'm going to go through it and then I'm going to go back through that loop to create a little knot. I'm going to go around and do this a little bit here just to kind of weave in the end. This is just securing the thread, so therefore, or the yarn, so it doesn't come loose once we put it on. And then this will be a little bit more secure if you want to add a little pom-pom or something to the top of your hat, because you're going to have pressure up there. With that pom-pom, you want to have some security to it. So having this all knotted in is going to help keep that nice and secure. Okay, so now at this point you could just trim this. Another thing that I like to do is just kind of weave a few more just without knotting it, just to weave in that end a little bit. Okay, and then the last thing I'll do is I'll go back through an area and do one last knot before I cast off, or like cut this and be done. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and trim this. All right, now you've got your tail that you started with way back when, and I did a way too long of a tail, so again, you only need about a foot, and you're going to go ahead and thread your needle, your yarn needle. All right, so around the base here, we're going to start back where we first started. We're going to go ahead and go in to a stitch and start weaving that in. I'm not going to go through and knot it quite yet. I'm going to go ahead and weave a little bit because this is going to show. What we're doing, we've flipped it inside out. What that means is that we're right now looking at the wrong side, but when we go to flip this back this way, this will be a brim and it'll show on the outside. So we just want to keep that in our minds as we're weaving this in. We don't want to look too obvious on what we're doing. Okay, so about the second or third weave, I will go ahead and do a knot to go ahead and secure that. This is a very long tail. Pull that tail out a little bit. Okay, so now that feels a little bit more secure, but I'm going to continue to weave this in because if you, for whatever reason, maybe something happens and the yarn untangles or undoes itself or whatever, you want to be able to have enough to go back in and fix it later. So all I'm doing is following one of the loops instead of both of the loops, because then that's going to change the design of how it'll look. So I'm just doing one side of each of the stitches as I go up. So you'll see that I'm just going through the next stitch up and next stitch up. So I'm just weaving it in to kind of hide it, hiding it in plain sight, right? All right, and once this is all weaved up, I am now going to be on the inside of the hat so I can do that final knot to secure it. And I'm going to go ahead and do that right here, just by going through that loop before I pull all the way through. And that gives it that security. I'll do one more little weave. And I'll probably just do one more knot. I like to make sure things are secure. So I'll do one more knot right here. Okay, and that's far enough up the inside of the hat that we should be good to tie off here. And then you'll just trim that, flip your hat right side out, and fold up your cute little brim. And you have completed your baby hat knit. Yay! Thanks for following along. We'll see you next time.